Washington Wizards General Manager Will Dawkins breaks his silence today. What do we expect to be answered by the head of the Wizards front office? We'll talk about that today here on Locked On Wizards.
You are Locked On Wizards, your daily Washington Wizards podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
DC family, you're locked on to the Washington Wizards. We're part of our family. We thank you for making Locked On Wizards your first listen every single day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. If you're an everydayer, we appreciate you that much more. If you're not, subscribe and join the DC family. It's free and it helps us grow. I'm one of your co-hosts, Ben Strober. I cover all things DC sports for 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. And alongside, as always, the DC Sports content creating savant, that is Abdullah Ayubi, the host of the DMV Sports Zone page. AB Will Dawkins addresses the media today. How are we feeling?
A lot of juicy questions needed to be asked, and I can't wait for him to deliver.
We're going to go through some of the questions that you and I would go up there with for Will Dawkins today. I will be there at Care First Arena, so I'll have a lot to report back on. I will let everybody know what we hear from the head of the Wizards front office. What do we expect him to address? It's the first time that we're hearing from him since the NBA draft here ahead of the regular season. Head coach Brian Keefe and some other Wizards players will be available to the media on Monday at the Standard Media Day, so we'll be looking forward to being out there for that as well. But right now, with Will Dawkins, year number 3 of the regime that's under him, Michael Winger, Travis Schlenk, one of the new directors of basketball operations as well. What are we going to find out from him today? I think there's a lot to start with, but I think overall the one thing that I'm looking forward to hearing him say is where he feels like the organization is right now. Because you're 2 years removed from this real teardown finally happening where everything has been gutted. You just remember the mess that was left for Dawkins in this front office by the previous regime. You're on one of the worst contracts in sports history with Bradley Beal on the max contract and just so middled in mediocrity for so long. You still have Kyle Kuzma part of the mix there because he was around at that time. And this organization really has had to go through a complete transition. If you just look top to bottom, the way the roster looked when he took over versus what happened now, it's completely different now because there is a real sense of direction that the team took to tear things down, lose and bottom out for a couple seasons, and hopefully obtain draft picks and assets so you could build a legitimate young core. Now the Wizards have a group of young players in place, but who is really part of that young core that is going to be here for the long run? I feel like Dawkins is going to answer some of the questions and maybe give us an idea of where he feel they are heading into year number 3 of the rebuild. But I'm not so sure if we're going to get a definitive answer from him whether or not he feels like this team has gotten close, you know?
And I think, Ben, the one thing that I want to see is how do people question the fact that this development of this draft class that you have this year compared to last year. Last year, you had 3 first-round picks with Bob Carrington, Alex Carr, and Keyshawn George. But now you have a guy in Trey Johnson who, let's be real, that's probably the most excited Wizards pick that we've had here in a while. I mean, this is a guy that's not a project. Look at the past. We had Denny Avdia, Rui Hachimura, guys who were just very raw offensively. Let's see what they could do. But Trey Johnson, the resume speaks for itself. What he did in Texas his freshman year was just unbelievable. And now it's how can we make sure that we excel and not hinder this guy's development? Because on top of that, we have these veterans, CJ McCollum and Chris Middleton, where you want these guys to contribute and maximize their trade value. But on the other hand, you don't want to take away potential rookie of the year candidate in Trey Johnson. So I do wonder what the press is going to ask when it comes to that type of situation where you have a young superstar potential guy in Trey Johnson. And another thing that I want to look forward to is the Cam Whitmore. Maybe you'll get some glimpse of him answering some questions about him because this is a guy who, Bilal Coulibaly, he's going to be missing the first couple of weeks, hopefully not that long, but I mean, when we saw the severity of the injury, it's pretty serious, especially since it's a shooting hand. Cam Whitmore, a guy who is from the area, how can he contribute to this Wizards team as soon as possible? That's what we want to see. You traded 2 second-round picks for him. A lot of people mentioned the fact that second-round picks are useless in today's NBA, but I don't think so. Will Dawkins doesn't think so. So Cam Whitmore, will he be able to carve out a role here in DC, and just how fast can he? A lot of those things I'm looking forward to. And Alex Sarr, year 2, Can he go out there and have this breakout year that we've been talking about? Can he be aggressive? It all comes down to him, but can you maximize these young guys' strengths? That's what I'm looking forward to when it comes to these questions.
Yeah, I think you brought up a lot of really good points there, with Whitmore definitely being a big one. I'd expect that question to come up pretty early because you think about where the organization was after the draft. They already drafted another player to play on the wing in Will Riley, and even at that point, the Wizards had a very congested group out on the wing because you already have the group of Bilal Coulibaly. Now Chris Middleton is part of that as a veteran presence. Will Riley obviously gets added to it. Justin Champagnie, Corey Kispert. The list goes on and on. Then all of a sudden, you announce that you have traded for a super young and talented player in Cam Whitmore, a guy that really didn't get an opportunity in Houston. Now he comes here because he wants a larger role. So you say, well, what does that mean going forward for everyone else? What's going to happen on the wing? It just feels like we have such a congestion. How are they going to divvy the minutes up? So I think that's going to come up pretty early, and I think the wing room as a whole is going to come up very early. And I think that would coincide a lot with maybe the plans for Will Riley and what the plans are for that. So I did a thread on my Twitter at Strober Sports if you're not following already, and I went through some of the things I expect to be answered tomorrow. And the second thing I put in here, I said, how do they plan on developing players like this year's first-round pick, Will Riley? If he doesn't see the floor much early on in the year, what's going to help him develop? Is that going to be playing minutes with the Capital City Go-Go? Is that going to be different installations they work on throughout a practice? What is going to be the thing that gets him ready to play when his number is really called? Just because if you have a guy that's sitting on the bench and not playing a lot of minutes, if he's not getting minutes with the Go-Go, then I'd imagine it'd be pretty hard for that guy to come off the bench at some point, maybe later in the year, post-trade deadline. If you see some guys head out the door, whether it's Middleton or maybe some of the other guys, I feel like even Justin Champagnie is a guy that you might see on the trade block at some point, depending on what the market is for him. He's young, on a very friendly contract. I could actually see a team wanting to deal an asset to get him because he might be valuable to a team that's contending. That's something we haven't really thought about, but it's something I'll throw out into the ether right now. He's a super young and talented player, and I could see teams being interested in him, maybe even more than Chris Middleton to an extent. But if those things do happen, then you're going to ask upon a guy like Will Riley to showcase what he has. Came off the bench in the Summer League, and ultimately, he showed some pretty good minutes. Really, in the second game, I think he came through for him. No, he had the finger injury that ended up kind of sidelining him for the rest of the Summer League, so they get to see as much of him. But he's a guy that is very raw in terms of his basketball development. Played 1 year at Illinois. Didn't start most of the year. He kind of was the six-man role guy for Brad Underwood's squad. And when he was able to get his opportunities, he made the most of them and really became a player that they called upon, especially late in the season. Now, I'm not sure what that's going to look like in terms of his role in the NBA because he's not as polished as a ton of the other guys, including his counterpart that was drafted number 6 overall in Trey Johnson. So what's the plan going to look like for them to develop him? I'm really interested to seeing what Dawkins has to say about that.
Also, Ben, the fact that how thin this team is when it comes to the front court position. I mean, that's one thing that you mentioned, and I always think about, was this on purpose to be bad at rebounding for another year to maybe help with the development of Alex Sarr? I mean, Tristan Vucevic, putting more emphasis on, hey, you guys have to go out there and rebound. Because outside of Tristan Vucevic, Alex Sarr, who we're still trying to figure out, is he better at the 4 or the 5? You guys tell us every other episode that he's better suited off at the 4. You bring back Marvin Bagley. I mean, Anthony Gill you bring back as well, but you're really thin at that front court position. So I want to know the answers to those types of questions. Like, was there a reason why, especially since you know this team was bottom 5 in rebounding last year, offensive and defensive, why didn't you go out there and get someone else? Is there a reason why maybe you have so much confidence that Alex Sarr breaking out year 2, if that makes sense?
No, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I mean, in terms of the front court, where do they see it going forward? Do they really see Alex Sarr developing the way they see fit at the 5? Do they envision a role for him being carved out at the 4 at some point? I don't know if they're going to get the answers to these questions, but it's going to be interesting to see, who asks these type of questions and what they say in response to that. Because I feel like when you have a general manager or generally speaking front office guys talking to the media, you're not always going to get the direct, honest answers. You're going to get a lot of coach speak, or in this case, general manager speak for the most part. And Will Dawkins, he's a very honest guy. I think what we've taken away from him in the first 2 years that he's been here in his press conferences, he hasn't really sugarcoated anything the way maybe you'd expect previous guys to do so. But at the same time, they're not tongue-in-cheek speakers. They're not going to say too much while saying a lot at the same time. Kind of the same way Dan Quinn and Adam Peters would handle a press conference with the Commanders. Those guys will they'll talk for 3 straight minutes, but they won't really say anything that's actually answering, what you're looking for. So we might see some of that tomorrow, but it's going to be interesting to see how Dawkins handles it, because I think he's going to get a lot of questions that are maybe a little bit on the tougher side. Not to say because he's done a bad job or anything like that, or people are saying there's a lot of pressure on him right now. But just because you've been losing now for 2 seasons, you're entering year 3 of the rebuild, you're going to get asked where you feel like the organization is. How close are you to being relevant again? That's a big point. The fans want to be relevant again. They are tired of losing all the time. So I wonder how he's going to be prepared for questions like that.
I love the Commanders analogies, Ben. I know some people are tired of it, but it makes sense. 100% makes sense. And another example of not knowing what this team is going to do, Jonathan Kuminga. A lot of talks about him being a Wizard, and then out of nowhere, this team trades for Cam Whitmore. That's I think how business should be done. Don't let anyone know your next move. You want to keep all your cards under the table. So shout out to Will Dawkins. I think he's doing a great job with that.
Absolutely. Some other things that we know will come up is the top 8 protected pick and what that means for the organization. I'm going to tell you what I think he'll say about that when we come back here on Locked On Wizards. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however I like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick and easy and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app today by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. So the Wizards do not own the rights, obviously, to their first-round pick in the 2026 draft, and that's something that's going to be of note for Will Dawkins tomorrow in his press conference, or rather today when you are watching this. So the New York Knicks obviously own this pick. It is top 8 protected in a watered-down Eastern Conference. I know there's been a lot of smoke about potentially some teams in the East that you wouldn't expect to contend or compete, finding a way to flirt with a seeding, not really a seed to make the playoffs, but you could see the team winning maybe enough games to where they'd actually lose the rights to those picks. So I know that's going to be something that comes up. And even Cam Whitmore was the guy that said a couple of weeks ago, actually, I think it was early August, where he said, hey, I don't see why we can't go out there and try to compete, try to make the playoffs with this team. I feel like we've got a lot of talent. The Eastern Conference is depleted right now because of injuries. Why can't we go out there and win a lot of games? And I think Will Dawkins probably would have something to say about that. I think he's going to handle it very candidly. He's not going to directly say, yeah, like this is going to be a year where obviously we know about that draft pick. We're going to make sure that we maintain the rights to it. I think he's going to answer the question in a way that's going to be very soft-spoken in the sense where he's saying, yeah, like we're aware of the situation that is ongoing, obviously, with that draft pick, but we're out there trying to develop guys every single night. That is our main goal. That's the main focus, is for everybody to get better throughout the season. We're not focused on the wins and losses. So by him saying that, essentially, it'll be him saying, yeah, we want to see the guys' development, but that also means they'll be losing plenty of games, and you probably won't have to worry about that top 8 protected pick going to the New York Knicks. That's kind of just how I see it playing out, Abdullah.
I agree with you, Ben. I think that's going to be the question of the whole conference of questions that will be asked, Ben, because this team, as much as we want to see this team be competitive, we also want to make sure that we utilize our draft picks, and especially since a strong 2026 draft class with AJ DeBonza, Darren Peterson, Nate Ahmed, etc. There's so many guys out there that can contribute to this team right now. You want to make sure you keep that draft pick. And Will Dawkins obviously is not going to say, yeah, we're going to tank. We're going to do. No teams admit that. And if you do admit, you're going to get fined. I just think right now it's, hey, we have these young guys. We have the talent. We're going to play them and see what we got. And we saw, I think Ben was it in the summer league interview where he mentioned how like the idea that we know we have that top 8 pick, but we're still going to go out there in any other way and perform. And I'm hoping that this team, ideal scenario is you win 25 plus games. That's what I want to see. And not only do you win those games, you also lose games in competitive fashions. You don't get blown out by a crazy point differential. And with that record, hope that 25 wins plus, ideally, you also keep that top 8 pick. For me, that's like an overall great season for the Washington Wizards coming up. But again, knowing how people want to address Will Dawkins, you want to hear how does this top 8 pick affect you? And it goes back to the fans, Ben. You and I and so many fans out there, we want to see this team be competitive. You can't go into another year, especially with that first stretch of games, and get blown out every game. It's unexcusable. And there's only so much that we can say when it comes to being patient. And if we keep telling you guys to be patient, but they're going out there getting blown out by 40, I mean, what else can we say?
Yeah, and you remember to when he was interviewed by ESPN in the Summer League, the direct quote he used, he said, "We're not going to take any shortcuts." And I think that was very, very telling into where the organization feels like it is and what the plan is going forward. Yes, they've established a decent amount of young pieces on the team that could mount into something in the future. But really, you can't look at it from the perspective where everyone is going to contribute right now, because as we know, the NBA is such a developmental league where guys just get better as the years goes on. You're going to have players that are going to blossom in the 4th year of their career as opposed to the 2nd or the 1st. It's very different from other leagues, I'd say, from that sense, because of the way players will develop on a certain timeline. And I think the Wizards have set themselves up in a pretty decent timeline where with the core that you have in place, if you can get enough of those guys to develop into really meaningful players that can have high impact on a team that potentially is playoff bound at some point, it's set up for success, because you'd hopefully see these players starting to peak, reach year 4 or 5 of the career or whatever it is when they are really, truly ready to be competitive. You're going to have so many of these guys under contract for a very long time, so it's not really a matter of like, how long can we retain these guys before they go and sign somewhere else? Because even the guys that were drafted in the previous draft class, they'll still have another 3 years under team control before they even become a restricted free agent. And even then, the team could still match any offer that those guys get and retain them for however long it may be. So you're going to have a lot of team control with a ton of these young players that you have right here. I mean, obvious candidates for extension, Bilal and Cam Whitmore after the season will be eligible for extension. That doesn't mean either of those players will get extensions. But that might also be another thing that comes up in the offseason, what they plan or what they think might happen with those guys. How are they going to evaluate a guy like Bilal? Are there any concerns with him because he's maybe not been able to stay healthy the way they envisioned? Do they feel like he's developed offensively the way they had envisioned for him when they traded up to get him in the 2023 draft? I think a lot of those questions will get asked. I don't know if we'll get direct answers that really tell us much or if they'll kind of dance around them. But it's always something to keep note of. You need to pay attention to the context, the way the question is answered, because you're not always going to get the verbatim answer that tells you the entire story. You kind of need to put the pieces together when you're speaking to the head coach or to the general manager, because they're always, they're going to be in the best interest. They're going to protect their players, protect the organization. They're not going to go out there and say, yeah, we're going to lose 65 games. We're going to make sure that we have a top pick. Don't worry, guys. You want the number 1 pick? We'll make it happen. No, they would never say something like that. It's not how it works. That's why Ted Leonsis the last 2 years said, we weren't tanking. We were just developing. Okay, sure. I didn't know taking all of your best players out of the game in the 4th quarter and having all of your young players play so that they lose the game was not considered tanking. But, it's whatever. That's exactly what needed to happen. And if they want to call it whatever, just call a spade a spade. It's tanking, but if they don't want to call it that, fine. I don't have any problem with that, as long as what actually needed to be done got done, which was a complete teardown, which exactly happened. They lost enough games to get themselves high in the lottery in 2024. Tried to do it last year, ultimately didn't get lucky enough to land the first pick, but they got Trey Johnson at 6th overall. So you got to feel like you're in a good spot, and hopefully one more year of that, one more really good piece from the upcoming draft class, you can really make some strides. The only other thing I'm thinking on the top of my head right now of something that people should ask him, what does he think is the biggest strength right now of the roster that's currently put in place? If he had to mark anything as something he is the most confident in going forward amongst this roster, what is it? Is it the group of players he has on the wings? Is he the most confident in that because he has so many different guys that they could play on different nights? Or is it the room they have in the backcourt right now? Do they really have a lot of belief in guys like Bub Carrington and Trey Johnson to be the backcourt of the future? Maybe we'll get some answers that pertain to something like that.
Yeah, and I want to call out those guys that still question Will Dawkins and how he isn't that great, and his tenure in Washington hasn't been that good. Obviously, if you compare it to the previous GMs, he's miles above them. However, this man hit on all 3 draft picks in a considered weak draft class, and the whole Kristaps Porzingis situation, Tyus Jones not trading him at the right time. I understand it is what it is. GMs have what they have, but think about it. The fact that he got rid of Bradley Beal's contract, a supermax, you put all those things that he's done, you really think that this man has done a good job. I think if you're a pessimistic Wizards fan, just say, oh, this team sucks. They're losing. Why should I give credit to the GM? Give it time. You have to give Will Dawkins some time. The roster and the situation that he was dealt with when he got to this team was just insane. So the fact that some people are out there calling for this man to be fired is just absurd to me.
It's funny that you brought that up because I just got a tweet that might actually make you mad, Abdullah, but we'll tell you about that on the other side of the break here on Locked On Wizards. So you said you wanted to call out all the people that don't believe in Dawkins, that have been critical of the way he's handled it right now. This is a real response that came through to my tweet as you were going on that little mini rant there, Abdullah. Somebody needs to hold Will Dawkins accountable at some point. He likes to be cute and do his little drafts and play pretend general manager, but we are severely lacking firepower. Got to get buckets and talent. The front office is too soft and scared to get guys they can't control. See, I completely disagree with that, with saying the front office has been soft and that they're lacking firepower. What do they expect? When you're a team that is fully gutting the roster of everything, how are you supposed to have firepower in superstar players only 2 years into it? They're having to draft all of their players right now. They drafted 3 players in the previous draft class. They just drafted another 2. It is way too early to say that any of the players they have taken will not blossom into star-level players that they expect. I feel like Trey Johnson is the guy that they are absolutely going to hit on with this number 6 overall pick. So, I mean, some people just need to understand where the Wizards were as an organization and what it takes to really rebuild and tear things down in this league. It does not happen in one season. You need at least 2 to 3 years to really develop, get your guys in here, establish a young core of players that you drafted. I think the OKC Thunder did this in one season or something. All of a sudden, when they traded for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he was instantly an MVP player, and everyone around. Chet Holmgren, he missed an entire season, right? Like his rookie year. Didn't he miss his whole rookie year? And people were skeptical of it then. They're saying, oh, this guy already missed the entire season. Now look at that. You would never win an NBA championship without Chet Holmgren. So it just goes to show you really need to give a lot of these things time. Development is the biggest thing, but you need to give the general manager time to get his guys in here to see what they can build from there. And then they could supplement in trade in the trade market or free agency. And they've already tried to do that. You know, Cam Whitmore might be an example of supplementation of something that blossoms into something here in Washington. I just completely disagree with that tweet I just got.
Yeah, no, that's some Wizards fans are just not too long ago. This team was stuck in the middle. We were in mediocrity, and that's the worst position I say in all of sports. Being too bad to not compete, but also being too good to get a high draft pick. But now we got these young guys. One of them is going to pan out. A lot of these guys are going to be role players around this guy. And I think Trey Johnson, like you mentioned, is going to be that guy. And like going back to what Will Dawkins said, no shortcuts. Previous regimes would make those shortcuts as much as they can and then get a playing spot and be happy with it. I mean, I remember a young Kelly Oubre gets traded for a wash Trevor Ariza. You trade Bojan Bogdanovic for a first-round pick. Things like that where it doesn't put you over the edge. But now you have young guys who can blossom into stars and hopefully a potential superstar in Trey Johnson. So it just doesn't make any sense for Wizards fans. I understand the impatience. We haven't been relevant for so long. We haven't had a 50-win season in God knows what, 50 years, 1979, Ben, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yep, that's right.
It's just like, I understand, but this time they're doing it right, and we just have to be a little more patient.
I mean, maybe somebody can ask, if you're a Wizards fan right now, a lot of them are probably out there frustrated because the team loses over 60 games multiple years in a row and has been really almost embarrassing at times in the way they've done it, the multiple double-digit losing streaks that happened last year as well that accounted for half the losses. What do you say to these fans? How do you convince them that this process is ultimately going to work? Why do you guys have belief what you're doing right now is ultimately the right decision? I just, would love to hear the perspective exactly from Dawkins. I know he's addressed this multiple times already, but you're 2 years into this thing, going into year number 3, where the expectations probably are that you lose plenty of games again. Maybe see if he kind of, lets something out right there saying, look, like we feel like in the process we've been doing what we felt had to be done for the past couple of years, and we're getting to a point where we are getting closer to being where we want to be. He already said that. He said we're not close, but we're getting closer. When are we going to hear the words from Dawkins, we are actually close? Because the way he said it last time, where they're closer but not close, means, yeah, they really aren't close. And it's pretty indicative.
Nowhere near the finish line, but we can somewhat see it from a distance.
Yeah, just kind of be interesting to hear his perspective on that and how he would address that toward a fan base that is desperate to see a winner again.
And I'm hoping Trey Johnson is the reason why this team brings back the optimism that we had during the John Wall, Bradley Beal days, Ben. I really think this guy's going to be the real deal.
I think he's going to be really good. I just think he's got all the traits that are necessary for a guy to bring an organization and uplift it back to where it hopes to be. Just, I don't know. Is there anything, AB, you feel like we didn't mention here that you feel like Dawkins might get asked tomorrow?
Some of these vets, when it comes to being flipped, I mean, Corey Kispert,
yeah,
they're probably not going to ask him, like, what's his future directly. But, again, CJ McCollum not too long ago dropped 50 points here in DC against DC. So what's his trade value? And Chris Middleton, the expiring contract and whatnot, and the logjam at the wing position. I just think Corey Kispert's days are definitely numbered here in DC. And I think going back to the 2024 draft class, I mean, there's so many narratives that we have to follow with Bub Carrington. Can he be that lead point guard after you trade away Jordan Poole? Alex Sarr, can he be that offensive threat, putting his head down and the high motor guy that we think he can be? And then Keyshawn George, will he be suited more at the 4 or the 3? The guys we saw in the summer that he went out there and balled out. So a lot of narratives that need to be answered this upcoming year. And with Will Dawkins' conference, I'm hoping to hear a lot of good answers.
It's going to be a big day today. Will Dawkins addresses the media at 11 in the morning. I'll be out there to report everything. For all that coverage, you can follow me on X and Instagram at Strober Sports. I'm going to have it all for you, direct quotes from the general manager of the Washington Wizards, Will Dawkins. And be sure to be on the lookout to our response, the answers to the questions that we find out tomorrow. We'll have our reaction video out at 7 in the morning on Thursday. So be on the lookout for that. Washington Wizards Nation, we thank you for making Locked On Wizards your first listen every single day. For your second, be sure to check out the Locked On NBA podcast for the best NBA coverage you can find. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. For my co-host, Abdullah, you be there on the right. I'm Ben Strober, Wizards Nation. We're out.